Welcome to today's Quister webinar regarding Oracle JD Edwards licenses. Become compliant fast. For your speakers today, you will have myself, Tim Denice, Steve Davis from Q Software, as well as Brian Stans from Q Software. Just a little house rules. Feel free to ask any question in the chat box during the webinar. We'll get back to them towards the end of the session. So before kicking off, just a small little introduction regarding Quister. Most of you already know Quister, but for those who don't, Quister is your JD Edwards partner of choice. We've been in business, in the JD Edwards business, for 14 years, serving over 200 JD Edwards customers worldwide. We have 4 delivery centers, 170 employees, 10 European offices. We have an average age of 35 years, which we're proud of, an Oracle Platinum partner, and all together, we bring up over 1,000 years of JD Edwards experience to the table. Now, JD Edwards is our core business. What do we do in JD Edwards? We implement, we roll out, we improve. We provide 24/7 managed services. We do business analytics and big data for our JD Edwards customers. We have 2 cloud propositions, one private, one public for our JD Edwards customers. And we have a digital transformation department supporting our customers with implementing innovative solutions such as IoT, blockchain, or artificial intelligence. But wait, why are we here today to talk about Quister's Q Cloud License Audit as a Service, which is a tool powered by Q Software, our security and license compliancy partner for over 5 to 6 years. So what are we going to be presenting or discussing today? Well, obviously, we'll start off with explaining to you how and why we should perform a license audit. Do you want to be compliant? Do you want to have insight on the risk that you're running as a company? After that, we'll give insight on the Q Cloud License Audit tool itself. How does it work? What does it look like? Which data is it picking up? What will you get back from it? What can you expect? Steve Davis will then also provide some customer cases, which will give some insight on what it actually delivered as an added value for the end customer. And Brian Stans will provide a demo using our Q Cloud solution with some data so that you can actually see the portal and the solution working itself. As the license audit is part of the Q Cloud solution, we also want to give a little bit of insight about the security audit as a service functionality. We will finish off with pricing, and then obviously we will have a QA. Steve, I'm hereby handing over the floor to you. It's all yours.
So thank you very much, Tim, for that introduction. What I'm going to do now, everybody, is to take you through the objectives, what we aim to deliver as part of this webinar today. And the key thing is to understand how to audit your Oracle SKU usage. Now, what I mean by audit your Oracle SKU usage, this is looking at the users on your system that have had transactional usage of your system over a period of time, and those users within your system who might have security set up that means that they could transact if they wanted to. Either way, it's about looking at all of the ways in which Oracle might consider that you have a license. Going through that process, what I want to do is to try and drive to an understanding of how we get reporting on any non-compliance. So therefore, by non-compliance, I mean where you have a difference between what you're licensed for and what you're actually using. And therefore, we have the bit in the middle that is non-compliance, should those two numbers not match each other. However, by having all the analysis and the data to hand, then what that gives you is the ability to go and approach Oracle to negotiate a deal. So it puts you in the driving seat of how you are managing your Oracle licensing. Now, the big question is, how confident are you that you are actually compliant with your Oracle license? Most people think they are, but most people just think they are. They don't know that they are. And many would then ask the question, are you actually ready for a license audit? If Oracle LMS decided to walk through the door, are they likely to find that you are actually using licenses which you have not purchased as part of your Oracle contract? That to be absolutely sure, you need the knowledge, you need the data, you need the analysis. And having that knowledge is king. Now, most people look at that from an internal project point of view, and it's a pretty tall order, which is why it's very seldomly done. And typically what they'll then do is opt for the second option, which is about going away and employing a specialist licensed service. And there are a few around. And typically what these services will do is they have their own experts on licensing, and they'll go through that manual process for you on your system. They might have tools that help them do that process, but either way it's still time consuming, and they do charge a fair amount of money for that service, purely because it can benefit hugely when it comes down to finding non-compliance and then fixing that non-compliance. Or of course the third option is you could just wait for Oracle LMS to turn up. And trust me, they will tell you if there's not any non-compliance. So it can cost a lot of money by taking that option. But it's an option nevertheless. But why would you want to perform an audit anyway? The knowledge doesn't just give you the ability to make the right business decisions. Knowledge also gives you the ability to avoid making bad business decisions. The CFO might have asked you to do it. It makes good sense planning ahead. But one of the other things that we've noticed as we've been going and doing these licensing, having an audit is a good way of either confirming you're in the right place or maybe suggesting that there are different options from a licensing point of view. It could be that you're rolling out another division and suddenly you've gone from being in a good place with licensing per SKU, and what you now need is actually an enterprise license. But again, an audit will show that to you. And by having that data, then that gives you the ability to go to Oracle and negotiate the contract that suits your business. So moving on, there is another option. And the fourth option that I'd like to bring to the table today is called Q-Cloud License Audit. It's a service offered by Quistor, and it's very simple. It's a service for JD Edwards. It's a very quick service and a very simple service. So I've said JD Edwards, but it only covers the apps layer. So we're not looking at the database layer or anything below JD Edwards. We're just looking at JD Edwards and the licensing for JD Edwards. Now within the license audit, we have a whole list of SKUs, including suite SKUs, that aligns to the Oracle price list, which means that we're making an accurate comparison between what you're using and what Oracle can offer, and then we combine that all with actually what you're contracted to use. And with that, you can actually run the license audit with the specific licensing that you've got under your Oracle contract, or you can run it wide open. A lot of people tend to like to run it wide open simply because it gives you your complete usage across the system, whereas specific licensing, you're, if you like, comparing apples with apples. However, the resulting reports that comes out of that analysis will give you your transactional use, and there are different time periods that you can choose. It's set up for standard as a 6-month period of transactions within your system, but you can set it for 12 months, and there are other options as well. So it's entirely up to you how the time frame with which you will run that transactional usage. We also look at user security. So as far as setting security up within the system, this might be for users that have the ability to transact but have not done any transactions within the particular auditing period. We look at non-compliance modules, and that's modules that you're using which you just don't have a license for. And we also look at custom modules, and that's very important in the JD Edwards world, where there is quite a lot of customization on some systems. It's a very quick process. So it involves downloading a Java applet, which is very quick to install, 20 minutes or so. That does some analysis on the system about your license usage, and then that sends the results up to the Q-Cloud helper. Now that whole process takes no more than a few hours. At most, you should see that your results are available the following day. It's all locked down using ISO 18033 Part 3 encryption, which is all to do with block ciphers. Now it could be that you're saying, well, what does that mean? Well, the only way to really explain it is that the 18033 Part 3 encryption is the same level encryption that Oracle used for the Oracle Cloud. So we use the same level that Oracle use in order to encrypt our data, secure our data, whether it be up in the tenant in the cloud or whether it be transmitting through the cloud. And one final thing is that no business data is ever taken up into the cloud. Now, business data, we mean business data, we also mean personal data. So that's the reason we run the analysis on the system for a license audit, so that we don't have any of that business data or personal data flying out of your system. It's all contained within your system. We just take the results up to the Q Cloud. How does it actually work? Well, this is a very simple diagram to show you the various steps. It's JD Edwards, and on JD Edwards what we do is we extract the data, we run the analysis from a license audit point of view, and then we encrypt the data using the Q agent, and the Q agent then transmits that data up to the Crystal Cloud, which receives the data, and then it produces the results. Now, we also have the ability to run analysis up in the cloud, but that's to do with security audit, and I'll touch on that later in this presentation. Once we've produced the results, then those results get sent down to be made available online. And like I said, this whole process takes no more than 24 hours. It can take as little as 8 hours, but we normally like to suggest to people that they allow for at least a day. And if you do this on a regular basis, what you get is the ability to build up a history of audits, which means that you can compare what your current audit to your last audit, etc., etc., etc. As I said, you also get reports. Now, when I'm talking about reports, I've got an example of a report later on, but that will become far more apparent when we have the demonstration from Brian Stans. So just to reassert what I was saying about ISO 18033 Part 3 encryption, it is very important for people to know that their data, wherever it might be, is safe and secure. So when we are transmitting anything out of your system up into the Crystal Cloud, it is encrypted using 18033, and when it is in the cloud, it is also encrypted at rest using 18033. It's all hosted in a totally secure environment. It's crystal controlled. And as I said, no business data or personal data is actually uploaded to the cloud. And so therefore, because there's no personal data being transmitted, it is also agreed that this process also is GDPR compliant. Now, when it comes down to reports, I did mention earlier on that I would show you just a brief look at a report. What we do is we can either produce it as a PDF or it's downloaded as an Excel spreadsheet. The Excel spreadsheet is very useful because it gives you the ability to really cut and dice the data that we produce. And this is all about producing forensic information for you to use in working out whether you're compliant or not compliant with your Oracle licensing. As you can see here, we've got suite details, we've got users with transactions, SKUs and user details, SKUs with the licenses, and the tabs go on underneath that. So I think you'll see more of this when Brian does his demonstration later. But before we get to that, let's just look at a couple of case studies. Now, this is what we call the FEAR case study. It was a client in Europe. This is a real client. They had 75 users. They sort of knew that they were vastly under-licensed. And they also knew that because of that under-licensing, the potential cost could be as much as 500,000 euros, which is a huge number to consider. So they needed to be able to do an audit of their licensing, but do it in a way that gave them the ability to remediate their license usage before they then approached Oracle. So they came to us and they did a license audit. The information that they got did allow them to remediate their license conflicts, and it saved them an estimated 300,000 euros, which is 60% of what they thought they could be liable for. They managed to save. They then went to Oracle on the basis that they did need new licensing and managed to strike a deal with Oracle. So they reduced that figure of half €500,000 euros down considerably. Good business, particularly when you consider how much the license audit cost them in comparison. Now, this is a customer case study that's all about good management. A €2 billion company in North America, headquartered in Europe. surprisingly enough. They just wanted to be ahead of the game. They didn't want Oracle walking through the door and finding that there was some non-compliance. The business is too big for them to be able to cope with that. They needed to be ahead of the game, one step ahead of Oracle. So they went through the license audit. They found that there was some non-compliance, and they acted very swiftly on that non-compliance by contacting Oracle. Again, they reckon they saved $200,000 worth of savings on potential license costs. So again, in comparison to the amount of money it cost them to run that audit, it made really good sense, good business sense to do that. So without any further ado, I think at this particular point, what I want to do is hand over to Brian Stantz, who has a long history of working with Oracle as one of their product development directors for many years in Denver. And he's going to take you through license audit and what it can do for you as a JD Edwards client.
Hello, my name is Brian Stantz. I'm CTO here at Q Software. Today I'd like to demonstrate for you the Q Cloud License Audit product through Quistor. So I'm going to go ahead and just get logged into the portal. Once I get logged in, this is now where, as a customer, you would request your audit. The audit process will run and pull information from your system about what you're licensed to within Oracle. The audit takes a few hours to run. Once it's complete, you can log back in and come and start to look through your results. So the very first thing that you would do when you log in is come over onto the left-hand side and drop down the audit results and take a look at the actual results themselves. There's a lot on this screen to give you information. On the left-hand side, you see broken down by SKU suite, and on the right-hand side, you see broken down by SKU. Now, in JD Edwards terms, SKU really, you could equate that to like a Lego. It's building blocks that make up the different suites. The SKUs are the base, and then the suites are different ways that Oracle has sold in the past. We give an example of SKU suites based on the JD Edwards price list as of today. However, it could be sold in different ways, and that's why it's very important to have the breakdown by SKU itself for reporting purposes. So the first thing I'm going to show you here is on the left-hand side, a specific suite. We're going to pick on Financial Management Suite. You're going to see two columns after each one of the suites. The first one is the user transaction count, and the second one is the user access count. Now, these are important. This first column, transaction count, represents the total number of distinct users who have actually transacted in the database, meaning add, change, delete for that specific suite. The user access count means that in your security setup for JD Edwards, there are 86 people who potentially could be updating data within the financial management suite. Now, to further drill in, I can click on Financial Management Suite and see the exact SKUs that are a part of that suite. And again, we have some columns here. The same thing applies, user transaction count and user access count for each one of the individual SKUs. We also have a third column here, and this is optional. This is if you actually know your license for each one of the SKUs. You can plug this in here so you can do some forensic analysis to see if you're over the actual count or under the actual count. Now, each one of these blue numbers on both sides are all clickable. So you can click on, let's pick on accounts receivable. I can say, okay, this says 16 distinct users have done transactions in the system. So I can click on that and then see a listing of the exact user IDs. We don't bring names because of data privacy. It's just the user IDs, okay? Same thing with user access count. This is the list of users who potentially could be updating that SKU within the system that could cause a license violation. Another way to look at the data is a summary, and you can click on the individual SKU name and you'll pop up a summary that gives a lot more data about which user has done what to which table within JD Edwards and the total number of transactions that have happened within those tables that make up that SKU. Also, if you click on the role detail tab, you're going to see the users and excuse me, whether they're active, inactive, and the applications or star all privilege that they've been granted in the security setup. And this is important because JD Edwards and Oracle will audit based on transaction, but they will also audit based on access. So you need to have this forensic data so that you can then show your usage of the system overall. So that is a high level of the data that is presented from the license audit once it's complete. Obviously, at the top here, you can see a couple reports. The PDF is mostly a summary, but the real good one is the XLS report, which shows all of the details so that they can be filtered for more forensic information. And this is what that looks like. When you come into the system and open up the Excel report, as you can see, there's multiple columns here. You can filter by SKU, suite, SKU name, even table name, user, and you can see the counts, etc. Now, this is the transactional based data. There's also a tab here for access based data, and you can see the actual same thing, SKU suite, SKU name, the user, but then you can also see the role, the active status or inactive status of that user, etc. So a really good way to be able to filter down and see information about a specific audit that you've performed. So with that, I'm going to thank you for your time today, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much for that, Brian. That was very useful. Even I found that useful, and I've seen it many times. What I'd like to do now, just before we wrap up, is to just take you through one of the benefits of doing a QCloud license audit. I mentioned earlier on that we don't just look at users that have transacted on the system, but I also told you about users on the system that had got security set up who could transact if they wanted to. Now, as part of license audit, what we do is we also give you the ability to run a security audit. It's a different type of audit, and it does, I will admit, use a different Java applet, but the platform behind it is exactly the same. So it is an analysis of what your security looks like, your general security, your data security, access to critical programs, what your segregation of duties might look like, and any mitigated violations you've got in the system. So it really takes what we were looking at from a security perspective and what users can get access to in order to work out your licensing. And this really flushes out everything to do with security so that you can this is part of the remediation process. So this really gives you the information to make a really serious attempt at remediating your license usage by remediating the way in which you've got security set up. And this gives you, again, all of the forensic detail that you need in order to make good decisions about how you go through that remediation. So it's a bespoke platform. It's one that's been built up in the cloud based on Java. And because of that, it's completely agnostic. So it will run on any version of JD Edwards and on any platform that JD Edwards runs on. It involves setting up a dedicated portal. As you've seen there in the diagram where I showed you the process, what we have is the cloud, where you get a dedicated tenant in that cloud, and that dedicated tenant is secured using 18033 Part 3 encryption. I mentioned the historical audit comparison. That doesn't just apply to license audit, it also applies to security audit. So all of the various matrix that you gain out of a security audit, you can also compare them over time. It's a Java applet. It still takes 20 minutes to install, and you still get the results in 24 hours. And once again, you get the ability to download a PDF report or an Excel spreadsheet with the results in it. And that gives you as much information as you need to go away and look at your system and make the corrections that you might need to make to your system. And I'll also add that this is completely independent of any security management tool that you might also be running on your system right now. So it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're using Q software to manage your system, it doesn't really matter. If you're using the security workbench to manage your system, it doesn't really matter. If you're using other competitive software to manage your system, it doesn't really matter. This is a way of being able to analyze how well your system is running and whether there's anything that needs fixing. And if you've identified anything that does need fixing, then what you then need to do is to use the tool that you're using to manage your security to go away and fix it. Again, it uses path-through encryption. Again, no business data or personal data is sent up to the cloud. So much along the same lines as License Audit, uses the same platform. The only difference really is about what it tests for, and that is due to the Java applet that you download and run on your system. So with that, I think what I'm going to do at this point is hand back over to Tim.
So thank you very much for participating in today's webinar. You still have a bit of time to drop down your questions on the right-hand side in the chat box. Feel free to do so.